It's Elvis Week 2025, and it's a special edition of the Elvis Impact. So stick around, because it all starts in just 3, 2, 1, go.
Welcome to the Elvis Impact. I am your host, Kathy Lee, and this is our other host,
Todd Papes.
And this week is Elvis Week, and we're going to be taking some time right now, talk about our first Elvis memories, what we remember about that day in August. I know I shared my memories, and now we're going to hear from our host, Todd's, and his memory.
Yeah, thank you very much. What I do remember about Elvis Week 20, we are in Elvis Week 2025, but I do remember on August 16th, the whole reason why we celebrate this day is, or this week, is because I remember sitting in the living room watching television. I don't remember what was on. It was irrelevant. And my dad happened to be home that day, and it was in the middle of the afternoon, and the phone rang, got a phone call, and he goes to answer the phone call, and then next thing I know, all I hear was, oh my gosh, he's just flipping out. And I'm like, what's going on? Here, my first thought is something happened to somebody, a relative or whatever, because that was, that's probably what you would expect when you hear that. Obviously something happened to somebody, but it wasn't a relative, So he gets off the phone, comes back in, and he kind of flies from the kitchen back into the living room. He goes, Todd, you're not going to believe this. He goes, Elvis Presley died. He's just going crazy about it. I'm like, what? And I think like everybody else, you don't believe this when you hear it, when you're around and just like, no, it can't be. This can't be true. And I just, for a moment or two, I'm like, no, that's not possible. Something must have been, you must have misheard it, whatever. So sure enough, you turn on the TV and it's all over the news. And it was real, and it started to set in.
Died at Memphis's Baptist Hospital this afternoon. Doctors say he died of respiratory failure. Those of us who grew up with rock and roll music, Elvis Presley was the king. And all around the world tonight, millions of people are saddened because the king is dead.
And it was just a surreal thing. I just remember thinking how weird everything was at that moment. Because before then, even though he might not have been, at the pinnacle of his career at that point, there was life before Elvis, and now there's life after Elvis suddenly. And it was just a giant difference. It was a time where if you were around and you remember this, everything just kind of stopped for a period of time. It was just surreal. A few days later, this is still going on. People are still processing all this. Of course, they show all the stuff that's going on at Graceland. They show the funeral procession and everything. And the other significant thing that happened at that time, and I'm sure you remember this too, every radio station you turned on at that point, I don't care what format it was, it could even be talk radio. They were playing Elvis music 24/7. You couldn't get away from it. Like, it was hard to find, if you were into somebody other than Elvis or you didn't like Elvis, good luck to you, because you couldn't find anything else on the radio if you wanted to listen to something different. And I'm not kidding when I say it was, it was anything from country to hard rock to talk radio. Talk radio, who never did anything but other than talk radio. We're dragging out records and playing the songs and talking about the memories and things. And I remember at this point we were, I think it was down in the basement myself listening to a lot of this stuff on the radio. And my dad came down with me, or came down to see what I was doing. And I told him, and there was still some daylight at this point outside, because we had some windows in the basement, and we sat around and we were just listening. And next thing you know, hours later, we're still in the basement and we're listening. And the whole time we're talking about the songs that we're playing. And I was asking him all kinds of questions about like what he remembered about this song and that song or the other. We were flipping around different radio stations to see what else we could hear or find out, because they were also interviewing a lot of people at that time too. And here's the funny thing that I vividly remember. I remember saying, I'm like, man, it's like they're playing all these Elvis and I get all these Elvis songs and I get why they're doing that. So this is just so cool because, you know, I was just so into Elvis at that point. I loved all the songs. I said, never forget this. Wouldn't it be cool if they had a radio station that did only this and played only Elvis music all the time?
Who knew? You were a thinker ahead of the time.
You're welcome, Sirius XM.
A little 10-year-old boy that had a vision.
I did. I had a vision. Yeah, it was just crazy because I just thought it was the greatest thing, because that was the other thing too. Because they were playing all this music, you were hearing stuff that you either hadn't heard like ever, or you hadn't heard it in forever because they just only played like the more common stuff that you would hear too. So that was just such a unique time. And I can just still remember that time and just pouring through, like, I wanted to like get through the newspapers and get all the scraps of all the things that I could find. And it was just a different time, and it changed. So, you know, like you had said in yours, just everything changed. Everything stopped, and then everything changed. So
in our website, you share a story how when you were a little boy, you sang with a broomstick.
Yeah.
So as a little boy, when did you start
doing all that?
Doing your Elvis and your Elvis appreciation?
I think that all started after the Aloha for Hawaii concert. That was our special that was on television. I remember watching that. That was kind of like my first big exposure to Elvis. Like, I hadn't known of him. I'd known some of the songs, but sitting there watching that, and I remember when it came on and we sat around the TV and watched it. I thought at that point it was like the coolest guy. You know, the way he handled himself in the show, the jumpsuit, the whole bit. It was just so cool. And at that point, all I wanted to do, I was such into music at that point, all I wanted to do was just sing Elvis songs. And then it just kind of evolved into this thing of like, every time I saw him, it just like, you wanted to be him, because he, you know, as a young kid, he just seemed so cool, so with it, so in charge. You know, everybody loved him. You already knew at that point what kind of a person he was as far as kindness to other people. So you just kind of wanted to, at least I kind of wanted to like be like him. And that's kind of where I just started singing the songs and stuff. And then I just, for fun, because I'm just a silly person to begin with, I just started goofing around with the moves. And then in our living room, we had this giant, basically wall-to-wall mirror. And so as I was doing the moves, in the living room with our, stereo that we had in the living room and playing the songs, because I would just screw around and do all the moves in front of the mirror. And then eventually it just started evolving for that. And then I started doing my own little mini concerts and what have you. So, yeah.
So through your mini concerts, what did your family, did they sit and watch? Did anybody appreciate your Elvis talents?
They tolerated my Elvis talents, I think. I remember most of the time when I did it, my mom wasn't home because I was like what they used to call a latchkey kid. But my sister was home. My sister was younger than me.
She was your one audience.
She was my tolerating audience. A lot of times, though, she would just, when I was doing this, she would be in her room doing her own thing or whatever, and close her door, because I would, since nobody was home, I would be in the living room and I would crank the crap out of that music, and I would turn it up to like concert level, and then of course as I'm doing this, I have to see what I look like in the mirror so I can work on my moves. And I do remember thinking, though, even then, how cool it would be, like, if I could somehow talk the school into letting me do like a little, like if they ever did like a talent show or whatever like that, like letting me put on like this little thing. I do remember that and how cool that would be. So I had this bug to be, I guess, a tribute artist even back then.
To be a performer.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, what's funny because I was always the shy kid back in the day. I was painfully shy.
You would not know that today, folks.
You would not know that today, but that is true. Painfully shy and always just head down, walking around and just say hi, real sheepishly and all that. And just I had a hard time like talking. I always felt like I had to be excused. I had to make an excuse for me saying something.
So you felt Elvis was your creative outlet.
It was definitely a creative outlet for sure. And it let me kind of get out of my shell to what I really wanted to do, which was perform and just be silly and funny and just do all the things that I love to do along that. But yeah, I didn't have any audience other than my sister, and she knew of it. And, again, she would just tolerate it and stuff like that. But yeah, it was.
So I have a deep question.
Yep.
What lesson, what one thing do you take away from being an Elvis fan?
From being an Elvis fan, what do I take away? Interesting.
Or how has Elvis impacted you?
Nice. Honestly, I guess I would have to say, as I talk through that, probably getting me out of my shell and getting me to a point of being me, being true to myself, and being not apologetic for the person that I am and that I want to be, and to express myself, because I didn't know how to do that. And still, even for the longest time after that, I was still afraid to do that. But at some point or another, that clearly, I think, set me up to when I got to be older as an adult, I didn't care anymore. And I was happy to be myself, and I was happy to be silly, and I was happy to make jokes and happy to sing and do my thing and do the whole tribute show. And I think it definitely had something to do with that, because I don't know, had I not had that opportunity, I didn't see anything that was pulling me out of my shell. There was nothing that I could remember that was pulling me out of my shell. Like behind the scenes, I was, when nobody was around, I was like that. I could let loose, but I didn't have to worry about anything because there was nobody there to judge me. I mean, even for my family, to an extent, like I was a little embarrassed, but I mean, it's your family. You don't really care that much. Yeah. But there was still a point of where I was still a little bit shy around them. Like I didn't want to really let loose and be myself, but it did. It set me up for an adult life where I'm happy doing the silly things that I do and being dumb and singing stupid stuff.
It just builds to Todd's character. This is a more lighter question. Yeah. If you could spend one day with Elvis, what would you do? What would be a perfect day with Elvis be?
Honestly, I think it would just be sitting around Graceland, and just letting him show me around of everything that he is proud of at Graceland. Hanging out, just having burgers like he used to love to have, or dinner, just something totally casual, totally off the cuff, having just conversations about anything other than his career. Like I would want to talk to him about, I'd maybe pick his brain a little bit about what he remembered about this and that and the other, but I would much rather have had a conversation where we would just talk about anything else, about, what are things that he liked growing up, or what he got into, or, what other, if we talked about music, what other music he was into, what made him happy, things like that. I would have, I think I would have gone around that route. I would have basically allowed him to be out of the spotlight and just be a normal person. is what I would do. And because that would be the side I would love to have had explored. That would have been cool.
Well, I have only known you for half your life. 20 some years. And I just want to say, I think you would also, you would be in your zone, your element with Elvis, in a day like that. That is a classic day for you.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, well, and the funny thing is too, like as we do a lot of this stuff, you know, you learn about what he was as a person. Like it seems like he had a lot of funny off the wall humor like I do. So I think we would also.
So he thinks.
I think we would have got in along in that way, in that regard too. But that's fine. By the way, why is my interview a ton longer than yours?
Because this is the Elvis Impact, and I have the mic right now, and I knew, given the opportunity, you would express yourself.
I gotcha. Okay, well now we know. Yeah, I'm done.
So thank you everybody for listening to Todd's memories and Todd's stories about his what Elvis has meant to you in your life. So thank you everybody for watching these. Everyone, please take a moment this week and just remember Elvis and the gifts he shared with all of us. Yep. So good night, everyone.
Whether you're black or white, whether you're country, redneck, or freak, young or old, from Moscow, London, or Memphis, Elvis Presley will still be the king of rock and roll to me.